What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ian's Life. Today, I'm starting the process on developing wiring harnesses for some new Yamaha engines. Stay tuned. Some of you may be aware from my other videos that I do conversion wiring harnesses for Yamaha engines. Specifically, I already make them for, and I'll show you here, the Yamaha Apex 4-cylinder engines. 160 horsepower 4-cylinder. These guys go on Highlanders, Kit Foxes, a lot of stuff like that. However, what you may not be aware if you're not in the community is that in addition to the 4-cylinder, there's a few other engines. And today, I have my shipment in of these two. This is the 3-cylinder naturally aspirated Yamaha engine that comes in, I believe it's the Vector. I may be getting that wrong on what sled it's actually out of because it's out of several. And this guy, which is the Phazer 2-cylinder 4-stroke naturally aspirated engine. So both of those came today from Jim Hensel, Spa City Sled Parts, my recommended contact for getting these engines. I'll also put a link in the description of this video on how you can get a hold of him if you want to get one of these two or 4-cylinder or really any snowmobile engine. But first of all, let me go ahead and set up a time lapse. Obviously, these are just fresh back on my trailer, and I've kind of got a bit of a mess going with this plastic that's blown off. So let me pull this apart and get these guys set up so I can get them into the shop. All right, so we've pulled the crate apart, and here's what we've got. This is the 2-cylinder Phazer engine. This is our 3-cylinder Vector, Viper, goes on a few sled engines, and these are all the parts for them. These are actually a couple of wiring harnesses for Apexes that were sent directly to me for rework. I work with Jim quite a bit. A lot of times he'll sell engines to people, and he's more than happy to separately ship the wiring harnesses direct to me so that the customers don't actually have to pull the wiring harness off themselves. And then these are nicely boxed up. This is, let's see, that's our 3-cylinder stuff. So oil tank, water, coolant expansion tank, wiring harness, and an air box. And somewhere down, yeah, there's a gauge cluster down there. And then this guy is our 2-cylinder Phazer. That's got our spare set of throttle bodies. Interesting. Gauge cluster, wiring harness, oil tank, air box, the whole 9 yards, all nicely set up. Now, one of the chief reasons that I recommend people go to Jim when they get these instead of buying a snowmobile themselves is simplicity. You can buy a snowmobile and tear it apart for an Apex or any of these engines, but it requires some specialty tools. And by specialty, I mean literally there's some clutch tools and whatnot that are a one-purpose tool just for Yamaha sleds. You have to buy that, pull it apart. And people often think, yeah, they can return those sleds, or return, what am I saying? Sell off the spare parts of the sleds when they're done to make money. But honestly, Jim's already factored that in. He's not an airplane supplier. He's a snowmobile supplier. He's selling those spare parts already, and that's figured into the cost of selling these engines to us. So when you get it, you get everything all disassembled, ready to go in the box. You get an engine that's been tested before it came to you, and you get a good quality unit. He has everything of all different mileages. These are specifically requested by me to just be inexpensive. I want them to be cheap so that I can go ahead and not spend a ton doing this development work, since it costs a lot to make and design these harnesses, especially when you're getting 2 engines at once to develop. So we've got them in. So let's see here. Next thing is going to be to get them off of the trailer and get them in the shop so I can stop sweating out here in the sun. Please forgive the background noise. I've got my air conditioner going, so it's a little noisy in here, but at least I'm not sweating any more than I already have. So what we've just done is I've taken and separated out all of the pieces that are not part of the wiring harness. This is oil tanks, gauge clusters. There's actually some electronics in here, voltage regulators, ECUs, things like that. But it's all stuff that I don't need to develop the harness right away. So this is all going to go into storage, and now I can take the wiring harnesses and the engines that I have behind me here, and we can actually go ahead and start working on those and getting them stripped down, get the harnesses stripped down, and start looking at electrically what we're going to do. So it's the next day, and we've got both of the engines pulled down to just the harnesses and the engine. Everything else is set aside for right now. We don't need any of that stuff until it's time to run these things. So the next thing we're going to do, and we're going to start with this Phazer harness. This is going to be the one I'm going to go through in this video. We need to go ahead and get this stripped back down to just the wires. We're going to want to take a look at this without any of the looming and see just what we have so far as splicing and everything else in the harness. Other thing I've done, gotten a hold of the wiring diagrams for these guys. So got a wiring diagram for the Phazer so that I can go through and actually identify some of these. This is one of the disadvantages getting these stock guys like this when you don't have a sled, is you don't know what every connector is. I actually have a pretty good idea because this is very similar to the Apex engine like I have over there, which I know very well. So on the plus side, when you get one of these from me, this isn't a problem because I label everything. But before I do that, I have the problem of figuring out what everything is. So we use this, go ahead and identify everything and label it. But first, I'm going to get all of that looming off of the harness, get this back down to just a pile of wires and connectors, and go from there. And now we're down to this. I apologize for the air conditioner noise in the background, but it's hot here and that is a necessity. So this gigantic spaghetti bundle that I have right here is our stripped down harness. There's a little bit of tape here and there, but it's just for things that I know are going to be coming off, like these grounds that will change. So I know they're getting cut off, no point to strip them. Next thing I need to do is go ahead and take my wiring diagram sheets I have over here, go through this and label everything, but I think I'm going to move over to my wiring bench now that I have this stripped down and do all of it there. What we removed is this big old nasty pile here. And by the way, just for the sake of saying it, it may not be clear immediately, this isn't something that I've done just because I'm doing development on this. This guy, every one of my wiring harnesses goes down to a pile like this. Once I have it in production, it's a little faster because I know the stuff I can snip off ahead of time, so I don't have to strip that. I just cut it and set it aside. But every one of my harnesses goes down to being a bare bundle of wires. Then the wires get stripped down from there and it gets rebuilt up. So let's go over to my wiring bench and start working on this guy, labeling everything and actually turning this into a respectable running harness. And that's all of the important connections labeled now. So next thing, I'm going to actually start pulling this guy apart and seeing what our strip down is going to look like. Okay, almost first item pulled apart, and I've already found something I kind of want to show because it's the kind of thing I do on these harnesses as I'm going through them. We've pulled this guy apart. Now, this is a little junction block. Yamaha uses these to connect, in this case, a bunch of grounds together. Unfortunately, this is a point that Yamaha didn't do a great job on, because if you look down in this connector, and hopefully I can get my camera to focus on this, there's some corrosion on those pins, which can be seen a little easier on this guy, because this is what actually came out of there. This is what makes the connection. See that green on there, that corrosion on those pins? I pull every one of these apart and inspect them because there's something that Yamaha does not do a great job of. This is not unlike all the rest of the connectors, this isn't a sealed connector. water and moisture can get in here and it can cause this problem, which can ultimately result in issues with runnability once the grounds stop being grounded in this case. So this is one of the many things I do, is every one of these harnesses receives a thorough dielectric grease treatment on these guys, and I recommend, whoops, dropped that, and I recommend to everybody that I sell a harness to that these be an item that's inspected at annual every year, just to make sure that you never have any corrosion crop up. They're easy to pull apart and take a look at and see real quick whether you have any issues. I don't expect to see a lot of issues cropping up with these in the long term, because on sleds these are getting covered in snow and slush and nasty stuff out in the weather where they're used, and that's just not something that most airplanes are going to see. Anyway, let's get back to stripping this harness down and see what else we find on it. First bit of strip down is complete. Now, this still looks like a giant mess, but it's getting better. We have a box of connectors here. This is every single connector that came off of the snowmobile engine. Not all of this is going to be used. A lot of this square stuff is not going to be used, but we're keeping all of this just in case I need any of it, because this is a new engine and I can't be absolutely certain, even though I have a reasonable degree of certainty based off of the stuff I've done before, that I know what's going on here. This spaghetti mess here is all of the leftovers that are going away. Now, there may end up being some little pieces of colored wire that I will end up using on final harnesses, because I do a lot of that. I want to maintain as much color integrity as possible. I have my own selection of wire up here, but you know, if it's meant to be a yellow wire and I'm using white, that doesn't help for diagnostics down the line if anybody's doing some checking on their own. But for the purposes of what I'm doing now, I'm going to go ahead and do away with this. No connectors, just bundle of wire. That all goes into the bin. And then I can take this box and actually start assembling something resembling a new harness. And here we are. I know that was a lot of time lapse because there was a lot of work we were doing. So what have we done? Well, we took that big spaghetti mess that I was pointing at earlier, and we've turned it into this much smaller spaghetti mess. Better question is, why did we do that? This is effectively an electrically complete harness. We've removed everything that I believe we're not going to need. We'll have to do some testing to confirm that. We've disabled some limp modes, gotten rid of a few other items. I got to go grab a couple of connectors to hook onto here, and obviously some of this stuff is going to get fed power, signals, start signals, stuff like that. So all of that still has to be hooked up to other items. But I do believe that at this point, I could, with the changes I've just talked about, hook this into my engine, turn the key, and we should have a running engine. Reason that it's still a spaghetti mess and not a nice pretty thing like, actually let me give you a demo. This guy here is what this is going to look like in the end, something along those lines. That's one of my Apex harnesses, all loomed up, labeled, heat shrink labels. This is what we're going towards and what the end of the video you should be seeing from me. Obviously that's not this. Two reasons for that. One, as I mentioned before, I believe I have caught everything that we need for this electrically. I may not have. In testing, we may find that some things have to change, or certain connectors that I don't have in here are required, because we have eliminated an awful lot of wiring between all the stuff up there and the stuff in my wiring bucket down there. So we need to test and make sure that I have actually done this correctly and there aren't any issues. Once I've done that, I also have to set the lengths, because, for instance, let's grab some wires here. Take a look at how long that is. That's going probably a solid 4 or 5 feet. Well, we don't need 4 or 5 feet anymore. This is how this used to be in the sled. This now needs to be probably 18 to 20 inches away. So all of this stuff is going to get shortened up, and we want nice pretty cable runs. So we'll be zip tying those back once this is on the engine and once this is placed where I want it, this being the ECU over here. That's going to be a firewall mount item. I set all my engines up to work that way. And with that on the firewall, I want to run all of these cables to where they cleanly run around the engine and hook in without either being really tight and too short or having a whole bunch of wrapped up wire zip tied somewhere that you don't want. So we'll get those to length. Then I'll take this back in here, set it down, do some conversion work, and turn it into something that resembles one of those nice pretty harnesses I have down there. So next thing, let's get this out in the garage and hook it up to the engine and see where we stand. So I know what I said I was going to do was to cut over to time lapse, but that's not actually what happened. I totally forgot to set up the camera. But what I have back here, and it is back here for a reason, is a real dumpster fire of just an improvised setup that I can run the engine with. Now there's a purpose to this. I've done a little bit of work off camera. Well, I've done a lot of work off camera setting it up, but I've also done some test work off camera. When I set up one of these wiring harnesses, there's always a lot of unknowns, pins that have to be grounded, things that have to be adjusted. And it's just not worth doing a really finely done harness and a really perfectly run test setup just for the purposes of then tearing it back apart and changing it. So that's what this is for. Now, I do believe that the last change I just made should net us a running and revving engine. So I'm going to fire this up real quick, make some noise. If it revs up like I want it to, I'm going to shut it back down, pull this harness off, and actually go and set up my proper finished prototype harness. My exhaust, by the way, is about that long, so these are necessary. All right, we're still getting a shutdown, so I'm actually going to work a little bit more on this. That may be fuel related because this fuel system is fairly improvised, but I'm going to do a little bit more work off camera, then turn this back on. We'll see if we can get another fire out of it. All right, so I don't actually want to subject the engine to any more running just because we're not running a water system, so I'm doing really short runs and shutting it back off again. But that last run, I think, is the success we needed and also illustrated exactly why I have this whole gigantic mess of a setup on here. It's for me to do hacking and adjusting of a harness like this. When I go, oops, it's not running quite right, there's a little issue that I need to deal with, I can just get in there, change some things real quick, and it doesn't affect everything else. So now I'm going to take some measurements off of this and go turn this into a finished harness. And for that, let's drop back to the time lapse. Okay, so I have a notepad here that is full of measurements for all of this. I've got my pile of wire right here. This is what we're going to be working with. So let's go ahead and see if we can't turn this into a nice pretty harness. So we've gone ahead and taken that big old bundle and we've turned it into this pile of wire and connector right here. This is where the magic happens. Now I'm going to transform this into a harness, and this is where it goes from looking like a giant mess to a very pretty executed harness all in one go. Back to time lapse. So with the wiring harness done, we're back out in the shop. Now, I have done a couple of things off camera here. Notably, We've got a radiator now kind of rigged up. I know it's a little bit awkward, but it works. And I've done a little more just to make this a little more self-contained. The purpose of that being, we're going to run this for a little bit longer. Now, it's run for a brief second before with the wiring mess we had, and for that matter, I've even done a quick test start just to test the hookup on this, though I'm going to film my extended runs later. So what we're going to be doing now that we have done our initial testing to make sure it runs is we're actually going to be scoping a couple of outputs and just checking to make sure that some limp modes and some other things are defeated on here. So this is the trickery where a lot of the magic happens, and we actually make a harness that's more than just wires. So I'm going to go ahead and drop back into time-lapse, do a little more work, and then I think we'll film this thing starting up and running in just a minute. Okay, so that successful test was what I needed. What we've now done is confirmed the engine will free rev. There's always a couple of things that have to be grounded or not grounded on the harness that are normally going to things like the reverse system or oil pressure switches, stuff like that. That all needs to be set up properly, otherwise the engine will limit its revs. That's a thing that Yamaha, I'm realizing, does fairly consistently across the board. We finally have that set figured out. So next thing I need to do is scope out a few connections, because we need to take a look at things like the NOx sensor, the trigger wheel, just a few other things I need to know, both for my own development of some future stuff and also for the, especially in the case of the NOx system, defeating a couple of limp modes. So it's time to drag the scope out here, which is going to be its own little adventure, and get that hooked up. I think I'm going to make a little patch harness so that I can connect into a couple of my connections while they remain connected to the engine, because I have to run it. It has to be functional while I'm doing this. So I'm going to go develop that real quick and bring the scope out here, and then we'll jump back to scoping this thing out. And right about now, you would be watching me boxing up the wiring harness and doing an outro right after the last couple of scenes I filmed, if I hadn't unfortunately lost that footage when it corrupted. So instead, I get to do my outro here in the garage, and as an apology for the lost footage, have a little teaser of some of the upcoming stuff that we have working on. Yes, you see the wing over there, we're still working on that. I've also got some new goodies in the background there. Courtesy of a little road trip we took. That's all for the Rockhopper project. But anyway, back on the wiring harness, it's all done. It's off to Teal Jenkins now for testing. We're going to be doing another one shortly, or we may, I'm not sure, I got to talk to Teal about this. Either he is going to be sending off his harness to Troy of Just Aircraft to test on the 103 Solo, or I'll build another one for Troy. I'm not sure about that one yet. Either way, these harnesses are developed. I'm really happy with them. I already have a few production harnesses in the works. Since there is a delay while I work on building harnesses, I have the time to build some of those up while I'm waiting for Teal to do the final testing, which I expect to hear something on the upcoming weeks. Unfortunately, I do not have any final footage for you of the engine running with a gearbox and a prop on it. That's stuff that'll probably be coming in the upcoming months. Lots of good stuff there. Hopefully I can do a few more of these videos on wiring and kind of show off where this went and some of my other projects I have on the way. In the meantime though, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.